sometimes you just need to rip the Band-Aid off and go with what is functioning in your head. It's not always going to be easy and it's not always going to be straightforward, but sometimes you just need to get started. And so for the first people who are joining the chat, whether we're on Twitter, whether we're on we've got a if you're watching on YouTube, I have a phone over here so that we're on Instagram as well. But then if you're on YouTube, leave your comments, leave your statements, leave your questions, and we're going to talk about some of the things that we are grateful for this year. But also, I've kind of prepared for things. So this is the annual, what do you call this, bathrobe smoking jacket stream. I have not throw the microphone. The thrown microphone is over there, Waco. Don't make me do weird shit. Um, but so this is the annual one. I don't smoke inside my house yet, but one of these days we're gonna sit here and we're gonna sit in our smoking jackets and properly smoke a good bit of pipe tobacco. The one of the questions that gets asked oftentimes is, which pipe tobacco do I smoke? My favorite is a blend called Black and Gold. You can get it from J.R. Fielding and Company, or J.R. Fielding and Company, out of Shoreview, Minnesota. You call him, talk to an older guy by the name of Dave. He's a nice guy, and then he'll mail it to you. But I warn you, Minnesota's got a mean tobacco tax. It's still just the best American style tobacco I've ever had. And it's a long tradition. So if we're going to get started, we've done a couple live streams before. We're getting better and deeper into the subject, but for today, this is a gratitude stream. This is something to be thankful for, and this is where I'm going to take some time in the midst of a few subjects that I've prepared to talk about. I'm going to be a little bit longer form. I imagine a lot of us are kind of having a slow day. But things that I'm thankful for, and personally, you're going to hear this often, and you're going to hear things like, I'm thankful for this community. I think the gun culture particularly has a certain problem with self-hatred. I think it has an issue with self-hatred. It's sort of like every single one of us lives in a love-hate relationship with what we do. We have to put up with quite a lot. You have to deal with customers and questions and culture issues and attacks from all sides. And what do we get in response for it? We oftentimes get a very little bit of thanks and less pay, and that's fine though. When I'm saying it's fine, that's what happens when you work in the world. You don't always do it because it is rewarding. Sometimes you do it because it is right. And unfortunately, because so much of that which drives gun culture is a sense of conviction, there is a ready pool of, let's just call it, applicants that unsavory businessmen are willing to take advantage of. And so that is but something that I'm thankful for within this community is that we actually have a certain amount of endurance. As I've been able to sit back over the years and look at how much gun culture has changed, how much our culture has changed for the worse in many, many ways. Gun culture itself continues to persist. Let's see if my Jimmy Neutron hair is gonna. This is like waking up late and not doing anything with it. So yeah, you can send your L'Oreal models after me. It's probably not the right way of saying it. My wife was going to be like, why are there people knocking on our door saying something about your hair? But the point being said on that one is, we hear a lot of things about being thankful for the community. We hear a lot of things being thankful for the gun culture. We have a lot of there's a certain expectation for somebody on my end of the microphone to be thankful for those who are out there. But in reality, what I run into is a certain humility. Quite a few, very oftentimes when I even feel like I am approaching the edge of quitting, whether it's quitting this culture or this community or this industry or this business or whatever it is. It's very oftentimes when I'm there. Of course, you're not going to see it because why would I record that kind of material? It's not exactly great. But then somebody reaches out and they're like, and they have something of personal relevance. Let's move this so I don't have to fight my own hair the whole time. They have something of personal relevance. Yes, I think I'm now officially. What is this? Is this cosplaying? Am I cosplaying that one guy? There's one dude on YouTube, Wrangler Star. Don't I look like him now? That's going to be a bad dig. So the point being said is though, like very oftentimes when I've met people who are at the edge of quitting, it's a very small piece of encouragement that carries them over the finish line, whether that's in Ranger School or in business or in everyday life. And so something that I'm thankful for is that as I've approached the perception of quitting, even this, I have been encouraged in a no small manner by some word of kindness or thankfulness that has carried us forward one more day. The other thing too is that what you find out in this industry and this culture is that so many of us are here because we think it's right, not because it's actually for our own benefit. And we've talked about this. We probably haven't talked about this very overtly on the show. But I'm gonna remind everyone who's listening, there's an opportunity here. If you want to comment on things that you're thankful for, if you do have questions, I'm monitoring a few systems here. I'm monitoring a few systems to see if I can speak across platforms. The the thing, let's see, let's put that away. So another thing that I've been rather thankful for this year is that it really does look like our community and our culture is maturing. And I mean that maturing in a very intriguing way, but it's maturing in a way that I think I would say my heart has longed for a long time, and that is I'm watching people mature in a way where they're pursuing earnest and honest belief in something, and it's not simply for the likes or the looks or the performance of it. And so what I mean by that one is um, the Lord has granted us opportunities to sit back and watch as people have become Christians. And it's not because of some petty evangelicalism or trick of, play of words, but rather because they've found genuine conviction in their heart. And we get to be there and be encouraged by it. It's like watching somebody discover the truth or be revealed to them, and you get to sit there, or like watching a movie for a first time. Like I'll never be able to go back to the day where I got to watch The Lord of the Rings for the first time. I'll never be able to go back to it where I was like a little kid sitting in the theater and seeing those two giant towers, those two giant sculptures at the end of the first movie, The Fellowship of the Ring, and just kind of awe. And I'm sitting in the theater at like 11 years old or whatever. I'll never be able to go back to it, but I get to go back to a time when I see this happening where I get to see other people see things like this for the first time. And that's something I have to be thankful for. So this morning I was reading in Second Thessalonians, and it's a very short letter from Paul to the Thessalonian church, which is where you get the name. And he says this, and this is in the NIV. This is an NIV edition of the Bible. This is chapter 2 of Second Thessalonians. Concerning the coming of our Lord Jesus Christ and our being gathered to him, we ask you, brothers and sisters, not to become easily unsettled or alarmed by the teaching allegedly from us, whether by a prophecy or by word of mouth or by a letter, asserting that the day of the Lord has already come. Do not let anyone deceive you in any way, for that day will not come until the rebellion occurs and the man of lawlessness is revealed, and the man doomed to destruction. He will oppose and will exalt himself over everything that is called God or is worshipped, so that he sets himself up in God's temple, proclaiming himself to be God. Now I know uh, so if you've spent any time in the church, in gun culture, or even to some extent some of just even right wing conversation, and I know right wing is a bit of a stretch because it doesn't really mean anything anymore thanks to oppositions. But you'll hear very often about like the end times, and people will talk about the end times, like, oh, the end times are here, we're gonna see it now, and it's all gonna happen. And I want to yeah, there you go. Let's just do this. I want to extend a word of caution. There you go. Now, how do you make this work? Uh, Whatever. Hairstream. There you go. I want to extend a word of caution. Let's see. Your network provider may change. Yeah, cancel. Okay. There you go. We're back to it. So I want to extend a word of caution to anyone who's talking about the end times and the end of the world, because there's this consistency that no man knows really when it's going to happen, and we get this weird anticipation, like if the end is tomorrow, then we're going to find our sense of fulfillment. And what it does is it produces a sense of urgency. If tomorrow the world is going to end, or the apocalypse is upon us, or whatever the joke is, that feeling, that idea, that ethos presents a certain amount of urgency. But it's kind of like the false urgency that you see in the military. If you've been, one of the things that happened to us in Ranger Battalion that I always found rather confusing is that you'd be a private, a new guy on the team, and the team leaders would come in and they would make ridiculous demands for things that just didn't make sense, and they were always on purpose, but some of them were for entertainment too. But they would judge people based on their perceived urgency. So like you'd say, we got to everyone to the whatever you call it, we had to go to like a formation or something, and the privates who didn't run hard enough were chastised for it, or whatever that meant. And what you got to, when you got to the core of it, was that it was disincentivizing a measured and controlled approach, and it was incentivizing a false sense of urgency. You didn't have to be motivated, you had to look motivated. You didn't have to be capable, you just had to look capable. And what you see here in this urgency talk when it comes to the end times is something like that, is we're all looking like we're trying to be urgent. But there's also a second part that goes into it. Theology has this subject. Thank you. That is such a nice compliment. Yes. No, no, yeah, I don't, we're on, it's on Whistling Death says you're gay. To have Whistling Death in the chat is no small feat. Thank you, buddy. We're going to talk to you soon. But there's this so in when you're studying the Bible, or you're studying theology, there's this thing, you see these themes, these repeated themes throughout time and history. And another version of that you see is how history doesn't repeat itself, it rhymes. And we've seen things like the fall of the Roman Empire, the fall of Constantinople, the fall of the Russian Empire, the fall of the American Empire, whatever you want to call it. These various key moments in history. I'm reading a book called on the history, the history of warfare by John Keegan, and you see this pattern reemerging over and over and over again, where a nation, an empire, a country, a great kingdom is established through fighting men. And fighting men rise to the occasion, and they cut out for themselves a place to build a home. And that home they build, it grows and it flourishes, oftentimes because it's centered on some sort of moral foundation. And it builds and it builds and it builds until eventually it reaches Rome size, or it reaches some capacity where the society that has been built by hard men, and built by hard men building for their own selves and building for their community, are replaced by a very soft and self-serving population. And the armies are pushed out to the borders. And those fighting men are enlisted in times of difficulty, but otherwise chastised and kept on the fringes of society. And where they are forced to live on these fringes, they are continuously, eventually persecuted and challenged. And you could almost see it something like this. You've got a man who's very accomplished in life. He's gone to the military. He's trained himself. His body is disciplined. He's in control of his capabilities of violence. He's achieved quite a bit in that arena. And he returns to society only to have society inform him that they don't want him anymore. The GWAT is over. Now they want a fat, not like, they want an overweight, skinny fat looking, kind of, sexually ambiguous, soft dude who, it fits in his pajamas and whatever. And this is irony, because I'm sitting here talking to you in a smoking jacket on a Friday. But what you have is, you have like that. That's not even like the dandy of like the English dandy. You see this happen through history, where the strong men, the capable men, go out and they become accomplished, and yet he returns to society, and instead, whether it's the way that the society has organized women, or raised up their women, or whether it has in work and in labor and in culture, the strong men of character and capability are only wanted when times are tough. But when times are good, they're cast aside. They're cast away with dispersions. But then what ends up happening is those fighting men, those men of capability, usually end up pillaging the capital. It's kind of a funny way of saying it, but you saw this in Rome, where the people that the Romans referred to as barbarians were referred to as barbarians because they wouldn't participate in the same activities of the people of Rome. They wouldn't participate in the foolishness and the pomp and circumstance and the lie that Rome had become. And so what ended up happening is that these people who were referred to as the barbarians, who in many ways could have been more or less literate than the illiterate masses that populated Rome, eventually decided to turn their ire against their, let's just say, own capital. And then there you go. There you get it. But you've seen this happen before. You saw this with the Mamelukes. You saw this in Arabic culture. You've seen this in Chinese and Mongolian culture, which are two different ones. But you've seen this where people choose to build up a capable class of citizens so that they can do the good thing, the cowboys, the frontiersmen, the fighters, the soldiers, the rangers, the whatever. But then once it gets a little too peaceful, then those people are thrown away, and they're thrown away with a great amount of disdain. So why am I talking about this in reference to the end times? Is because it's a cycle. It's not a cycle. I'm sorry, it's not a cycle. It's a repeating theme. It carries on throughout history. You see it over and over and over and over again. In Second Thessalonians 2, in this part of the Bible, you see Paul warning the church, the Thessalonian church, against a people who, as I will quote verse 4, he will oppose and will exalt himself over everything that is called God or is worshipped, so that he sets himself in God's temple, proclaiming himself to be God. Mankind will set himself up in God's temple, proclaiming himself to be God. And where has this? So when I think what we'll see when whatever the end times is, whenever the world comes to a close, it will be so obvious that there will be no denying it. It will be something like, I don't think people who are Christians will be surprised. I think they'll be surprised in the sense that they won't know the timing, but it's kind of like the anticipation of a rifle shot. Like, you're going to shoot, you know it when it happens, but you're not exactly there. You don't have the exact timing. And the anticipation of pain is quite oftentimes worse than the experience of pain. And I think this is going to be one of those experiences that challenges that notion, is that we're not going to be able to predict it. But what we can see is that this pattern exists through history, where cultures will approach near apocalyptic end time prophetic situations only to fade away before meeting the full conditions of the end of the world. And I think this process is going to continue, and it's going to continue. So we just had a bunch more people join the chat. We're on YouTube, Twitter, and Instagram, and this is the gratitude stream. So if there's something that you're thankful for this year, go ahead and post it in the comments. We'll read it out loud if you want to, and then we'll carry on. Because this one's very much I want the stream to be a little bit more community focused, a little bit more interactive on my end. So we got one. Hope you're well. As for the topic, it would eventually be the end of our time as opposed to all time. Everything that comes from man falls unless it's based in God. Yes. So here's the example. I don't believe that the end times are upon us, because I don't think that any man can really determine such things. But what I do think is that we're seeing the end of an era. This is on Instagram, but you literally beat me to the point, and for that I thank you. So I lived in Minneapolis during the 2020 and 2021 riots. If you listen to the show regularly, you've heard me talk about it a few times. And this recently, I was sort of re-informed. I don't think I would say I had forgotten it, but it didn't come with the surprise that was expected. But I found out that there's one of the issues that people who live within Minneapolis are struggling with is the dating scene. And I don't envy you. I've been married for a number of years here, and so I think I made it. Sometimes it legitimately feels like I was I made it onto the ship before it sank, and that sounds like a very selfish way of saying it. But I was able I met my wife in a time before, like, the dating apps really exploded. But I found out that there's a the gay community in Minneapolis has got an issue where every weekend there's it's not the entirety, everyone knows this, but there's something like 60 to 70 dudes that show up for this, moral decay, I'm gonna get back to you in a second, that show up for this, basically, like, this gay orgy every week, and it's kind of ridiculous, and you could imagine you living in Minneapolis, which is one of the most LGBTQ supporting cities in the country, which literally burned itself to the ground for some radicalism, and it goes out of its way to make sure that the entire culture and world knows that it is very, very supportive of whatever LGBTQ is. It would not be surprised to find out that the people who are within that community are suffering because of their own actions. And what you're finding is that uh, gay men are having a hard time entering into relationships with other people because the attitude in that community is so promiscuous in Minnesota that it is falling apart. And I'll tell you, the city of Minneapolis is basically, in my opinion, almost completely lost. Like, it's going to have to burn itself out before we can get much further. Um, and so what I'm saying on that one, and the argument is to be said, is that we're capable of looking out into the world and seeing the absolute degradation of society. Like, that is not a big ask. That is actually a really, really low early thought to engage in. It's a really, really, like, to see the degradation of society and say this ain't right. That's actually an early part. That's a good thing for people to come to, but it's an early recognition. What takes a little bit more time is looking at how then do we go forward? How then do we live? So, like, if you live in Minneapolis and you live in an area where it openly praises, I got to move this out of my way. I'm looking at the wrong screen and I realize I'm hiding behind my microphone. If you live in an environment that openly praises that which is evil and openly condemns that which is good, what do you do about it? And that's a hard question for a lot of people to answer. And I think that is what our generation, the millennial generation, has been saddled with. Like, that is the quintessential question of the millennial, is that we live in a society that is that is still surviving on the rotten bone, the rotten flesh of the amount of wealth that our generations have acquired. And so it can survive on that sustenance for only so long. But as a result, it's committing suicide of the mind. And that suicide looks like the suicide of a city. So Minneapolis is a city that was not beaten or conquered by it wasn't necessarily beaten or conquered. It actually committed suicide. Minneapolis is a city that decided that it no longer had the will to live. And it did this, and in doing so, it allowed a pathogen to enter into its environment. And that pathogen came in two forms: one, an ideology, and two, apathy. And the apathy of the city was that there was nothing that could be done about it. It was just falling apart. And I think that belief system has taken hold. But the suicide of Minneapolis has been taking place for some years now, and it's an interesting place to be. What's up, Raidworks? All right, so that's the case too. I learned, or I got yeah, I feel like I got married at the right time. It's crazy out there if you are trying to start a family. Absolutely. So moral decay patchwork. This fine smoking jacket robe was bought for me by my wife a number of years ago, and I quite frankly don't wear it enough because it's not impossible to acquire and it's not completely cost prohibitive, but I'm afraid of ruining it. It's a little short, which I think she did on purpose. So I can't really wear it around the house without fear of, like, scaring the neighbors. But so we're doing a waist up stream here on social media for gratitude. So one of the things that I'm thankful for, and the important thing, and talking about, like, the suicide of the city and the end of Minneapolis, is that what we have been stripped of is we no longer get to place our hope in men. We no longer get to place our hope in, like, the construct of man, and so the ideology of the atheist has fallen apart. It's collapsed in a burning pile of hopelessness and anxiety, and then the materialism of the boomer has fallen apart. And it's a hard pill to swallow, but I think it's a good one, and something that I have actually become thankful for is that I don't live in an age of I don't live in an age where I am privy to such decadence that I would turn my eyes away from the Lord. That is something that I'm thankful for, and it sounds really strange in some ways, but if we actually say to ourselves that what we believe is what we believe, that we cannot that this world is temporary and what we do here is only a call to what is to come, I would hate to lose sight of the literal salvation of this world because I was whisked away by boomer consumerism. Yeah, the communists complain about consumerists, and we might call people like that strange bedfellows, but that is actually a trap. Their malice and their resentment is the only thing that's come to define them, and so we should find our ways. We should not find ourselves in community with people whose end goal value is the destruction of everything that we love. And so what I'm saying though here is something that it's a small thing that I'm thankful for, and I do want to hear what you are thankful for as well. But it's a small thing to be thankful for, and that is that I don't live in an era where my faith is being tested by materialistic gain. We live in a difficult time. I mean, finances are hard for everybody, and for most people in this culture, especially in gun culture as a whole. But the brace ruling, for all it's worth, did more than just make everybody a little edgy about whether or not you register that thing or you don't. But what it really has come down to for most of us is it's affected the bottom line of a bunch of companies that now have to pull entire sections of their inventory off the list. You think every barrel manufacturer that makes an 11.5, what are they going to do with that barrel? Like, I mean, you can still sell upper kits, but now we're back to like pre-brace era. You look at everybody who sells an AR-15 at all, like those companies have employees. Those employees participate in gun culture. Those employees help keep this world rolling. Like, and this world continues on. And so, uh, that is where we are at as a society, is that like the thing that we have faced as a community is that our finances have been stripped out from underneath us, but we will endure. um yeah, I mean, it's an interesting time to be in gun culture because you certainly are not making a killing. You're not making a whole lot of money, but but we are doing is we're doing the hard work. And I believe that 2023 was a bit of a culling period and will continue to be a bit of a culling period for gun culture. And that is that over the winter, this winter in some ways is sort of, and it has this feeling of being the last call for people to prepare for what's going to happen in 2024. And we don't know what's going to happen. I mean, the short answer is it's very likely that nothing is going to occur. It's just going to be a boring year. We're going to have a shit election. People are going to complain about its legitimacy. Gas prices are going to go up. Eggs are going to go up. Wages are going to go down. You know, some president's going to claim that he saved the country. It's not going to happen. But we move on. But still, I think the darkness that we're looking at is that all the knives are coming out in our community, in our culture, in America, in the West, and all the knives are coming out. And when we talk about this thing called civil war, the American Civil War was a premium example of a Clausewitzian or a von Clausewitz formal civil war. It was a premium example of this idea of a von Clausewitz style warfare. You almost had, well, you had uniforms, you had armies, you had generals, you had marching orders, you had all these things going together. But what people should refer to as like the next civil war is already going on. You're either a casualty or you're a participant. I mean, that is the world that we live in now. Because that war, this idea of warfare has changed. And those of us who are still stuck in the mentality that warfare involves uniforms and officers and marching orders and rank and file, those people are being left behind. They're being pushed and shoved around, and they're being easily manipulated by the reality that we live in. The reality that we live in is that warfare has, for better and for worse, shifted back to a more, I wouldn't call it primitive, but earlier time frame mentality, and that is what Mao was talking about, and what you saw a lot in like Eastern European worlds. I wish I could do just more invitations, but I guess I can. The only problem is it's only going to appear on one or two of the streams. I can't do it on both. So warfare is changing. We've got one. So, it's like Victim Henry, but I don't think that's right. VCTM Henry says they are thankful for their husband and their baby, and they're deliberately are definitely helpful for the ability of self-reflection and level-headedness that God has blessed me with. I don't know where I'd be today without them. Family is a something to be thankful for, and it's something that we're thankful for too. My wife and I celebrated a very quiet Thanksgiving down here in the desert, and so for that time, we just basically ruminated on things that were important to us. So yes, go leave the things that you're thankful for in the stream. The comments, and we'll go through them as we go. But what does Second Thessalonians, the death of Minneapolis, and the changing face of warfare have to do with each other? Well, this Second Thessalonians talks about how in the end times, you will see mankind worshiping themselves as God, and then they will try to submit everything in creation under mankind, and that will be one of the things that we see as the end of the world approaching. Is mankind will literally try to recreate the world in its own image, and this is what I refer to as imago imperium. Is mankind will seek to try to recreate the world in his own image. Thankful for philosophical pipe smoking rangers. Yeah, thanks, Luke. Thanks, Luke. We're gonna have to sit down and talk sometime again in person now, because I think a pipe stream is a really good way to call it. The philosophical pipe stream instead of the philosophical pipe dream. Yeah, it's a little foolish, but we'll get around to that. So what we're talking about here, though, is that in the end of times, in Second Thessalonians, Paul is talking about how when the world is coming to an end, mankind will essentially prop himself up as God, and we see that oftentimes. I mean, there's no better example of that in our day and age than socialism, communism, and any sort of like collectivism. It always replaces the seat of morality with like the will of the people or democracy or some arbitrary concept, which ultimately obfuscates the line between church and state by creating an environment where the state dictates that which is moral. And so but these are only microcosms. These are only think of them as echoes. Like you're standing in a giant canyon, and you yell something out and you get an echo back. Think of it as echoes, but in reverse. The shout hasn't happened yet, and we're just hearing the echoes through history. We're seeing this theme reappear throughout time: the fall of Rome, the collapse of the Nazi organization, which is not a good thing. The Nazis were not good people, sorry. But you see the collapse of societies, the degradation of communities. Like these are the echoes through history that are playing in reverse. They are all pointing towards something that's going to happen at the end. So if America collapses into licentiousness and greed, and America collapses under the thumb of its own materialistic, self-serving bullshit, then it will most likely not be the end of times. It will most likely be another echo in reverse pointing towards the future. And one example of that microcosm is the collapse of Minneapolis. And Minneapolis is a dead city. It's a dying city that has committed suicide. The people there no longer have the will to live because they no longer have the will to hold on to any sort of identity that isn't completely degraded into some sort of foolishness. And so that is an interesting but there's a reason for it. There's a payout in it. And this is something that's become immensely personal to myself lately, and that is this idea of deliberate failure. So imagine you have a goal ahead of you, something like Ranger School, right? And Ranger School or some sort of objective, whether it's a business, whether it's your community, whether it's reading a book or a bit or like what you consider success in life, raising a family, getting married, being involved in pursuing a woman in a date or a man otherwise, your positions. Yeah, right. Thanks, Luke. And so if you look at it this way, if you think of being in pursuit of a goal, like it's so big, it's so grand, like dying to Christ or dying. I'm sorry, dying to oneself and becoming in a life of faith or pursuing a life of meaning. There's this interesting trap that we set for ourselves, and I say we because I have done it myself, and I don't think that I am so special that I deal with unique problems. I am just a man like you who are listening to me. And that is that we may pursue a goal or we may pursue some value, some virtue with 99% of our being, almost all of who we are. But we keep one element in reserve in the event that it fails. Think of it kind of like insurance. And it goes like this. Imagine, you imagine you are in pursuit of some sort of version of like economic freedom or economic liberty, or maybe it's a political victory or whatever you want to call it. And you're in pursuit of this goal. You have this dream set before you, and you are pursuing it with 99% of who you are. But secretly, what you're doing, and you're giving speeches, and you're giving argumentation, and you're putting your time and effort into this business or whatever you want to call it, and yet you're keeping this little piece of you in reserve. You're keeping a little piece of you in reserve, and that piece of you that you're keeping in reserve is insurance in the event that you don't get what you want. Your goal does not come to fruition. You do not get this achievement, or it doesn't turn out to, or even more specifically, it turns out to be a disappointment. So you think about it this way. Again, you have this goal set before you that you've decided to. You present yourself as if you are all in. You are fully committed to victory. It's a battle ahead of you. It's a force to be reckoned with. But that little percentage of you, that small sliver of you that you keep in reserve, is something that you keep in reserve so that in the event that it doesn't succeed, you can enjoy that. So so I in my own life, I've pursued in some ways what we're doing here at Redacted or other things in my life with that 99% effort. And in the event that it doesn't work out, whether I don't get the job or the thing doesn't get accepted or I don't get the thing that I want, I'll turn to some sort of self-destructive behavior like alcohol abuse. And it's an interesting thing to think about it because some everyone struggles with their own issues and everyone has their own hardships and mountains to climb, or so to speak. But for myself, I was finding myself in this pattern where like I wanted something so much that I was willing to use my disappointment in its non-achievement as fuel to motivate my self-destructive activities through the use of alcohol. It was like if I in there was a part of me that actually secretly wanted the projects to fail so that I could use it as an excuse to have a drink or something, and this is a personal example, but I think about this in a much broader sense. So you think of a person here who he presents himself to the world. He's a part of gun culture, whatever. He's getting ready to do a ranger school thing. He's got some objective, and he's building his courage up, and he's building his momentum, and he's talking to people, and he's like, "This is my commitment." And he's talking about this thing that he wants to do. He's working towards, whether it's a business or a project or a product or a process or some sort of achievement, climbing a mountain, whatever. And the next time you meet him, it's years later, and you ask him how it went, and he said, and his life is in ruins now because he's decided to commit himself to self-destructive behaviors. He's become an alcoholic, and he says, "It was so close, but we fell short, and it was a tragedy, the greatest of tragedies. I was I was on the road to becoming a ranger or whatever. I was going to write the paper, write the book, become the philosopher, run the business, become the person. But because it didn't succeed, you know, um, there was some tragedy that caused it to collapse. And in that collapse, I started drinking, and then in that drinking, you create this cycle, this cyclical pattern of in like pursuing a new goal, expecting it to fail, but knowing that that failure will be used as justification for your bad behavior. And this is what I would call a deliberate failure, is that that we will set ourselves up with goals and objectives that we cannot achieve, so that we know that in failing them we can at least be comforted by some sort of something, whether it's comforted by some sort of chemical or some sort of activity. And I think that's an interesting way that we play tricks on our minds, and what we do, and play tricks on ourselves when we say, well, there's this bad behavior that I have: masturbation, pornography, alcoholism, drug abuse, whatever you want to call it. And we justify that action as a soothing experience for, maybe it's even vengeance or anger or violence. We justify our bad behavior by bad things that happen to us. So I am this way because something bad happened to me. Some goal that I had was not achieved. Some plan that I had made did not come to fruition, or I experienced hardship on the battlefield, or something like that. And so we take that idea, that we take that thing that we experienced, and we use it as justification for bad behavior. And instead of trying to fix the bad behavior, instead of trying to put down the bottle, or instead of trying to pursue a meaningful life, we continuously set up for ourselves new versions of that failure to happen, so that we have more justification to engage in the bad behavior. We essentially produce the situation for the whatever you call the trauma, to produce the post-traumatic stress disorder, so that we can have the trauma by which to justify our bad behavior. It's this continuous cycle, this continuous experience. And I think that and when I look at maybe the West as a whole, and I look at gun culture, and I look at our community, something that I think is worth warning about is this perpetual, uh, let's just say, whinging for some sort of bad thing to happen as justification for our bad behavior. The fact that we're constantly under attack gives us a justification for being shitty people, or being evil or wicked, or engaging in immoral masturbation of violence of some sort. Because our lives are not wealthy, we're not finding achievement, we can become alcoholics. Because our lives are not, because the West is falling, we can exist in a might makes right philosophy. And this is I think this is actually a very it's a grave, we don't give temptation its due. Often we think of temptation as something simple, like a short skirt, or a hooker, or something like, yeah, I mean, those are going to be over the top, but like, a short skirt or an easy glass or something like that. But temptation is oftentimes much deeper rooted in who we are. Temptation oftentimes takes the form of that feeling you get when something bad happened, but you're going to have a drink because it's going to make you feel better. That's the temptation, is that you're going to continue to promote failures in your own life as further justification, giving you reason to have that experience of saying, life is rough, but I'm going to drink so I feel better. And I think that's something that we do very often, or that, I'm sorry, I think that's something that we do often, and that is a very grave danger to who we are, is that we could produce in ourselves this feeling of being hurt, of this feeling of being injured, or this feeling of being oppressed, so that we can use that feeling as justification for our malice. You see this very clearly. Just as much as it's easy to see outside of our own circles what we kind of maybe hold in danger to ourselves. Classic examples that, the wickedness that you deal with in yourself is oftentimes the same wickedness you see in other people. But it's the resentment of Black Lives Matter in Minneapolis, literally fabricated versions of oppression so they could justify their malice in burning down a city. So in other words, this is the man creating his own hate crime against himself, and then convincing himself that it's just he's justified in producing the farce because it is indicative of the culture that he lives in. The man he burns down the building and says he's oppressed. Like, this is the issue that you live in. The problem is Black Lives Matter wants the oppression. The oppression is their fuel for life, and if you just ignore them, they go away. In that sense, or you call it out, like, it's just that's what it is. And so we got a Johnny Moonraker in the chat. Oh no, this is about to get funny. So so this is what we're looking at, though, is like deliberate failure is an interesting thing that we set ourselves up for, because it gives us justification for bad behavior. And we do this as individuals, we do this as a culture, and we've done this as the West. And you see this as in we look at corruption, and we look at wickedness, and we look at failure, and we look at communities that have fallen apart, and we say, well, it's all hopeless, so I might as well be alone and be angry in my room, or I might as well retreat into the bottle or something like that. We might as well give up on participating in the American experiment because there are communists among us. But in fact, it's quite the opposite. This is the time when we bolster the ranks. Gun culture is at a time where it is in a receding position. We are kind of like a breathing in and out. Gun culture is sort of offloading freeloaders right now, people who don't want to participate in the community, they don't want to be a part of it, and they don't want to do the hard work, because this is when the hard work happens, when there isn't somebody there to always be, there isn't some easy motivation, there isn't some easy preparation to make it happen. And so what we do is we this is the time where it's difficult, where we are actually choosing to support one another, when we actually are choosing to become a part of our communities, when we actually are choosing to like take that risk. And for some people, they're alone and they're seeing other communities and they're trying to find their way in. And for us, other of us, we're already in our little, we have our little bubble, and we're considering who to let enter in, and that's just how it goes. But um the warning and the purpose as we prepare for 2024 is that this winter is going to be hard, and it's going to be cold. I think it's going to not cold just in temperature. I don't know how cold it's going to be. I live in the desert, for goodness sake. But I am saying that I think this is going to be a difficult winter for many people. And the reason why I say it's a difficult winter is because it's been a difficult summer. I think for some people, they went through the crucible in the summer, and that has built them into a position of leadership for the fall and the winter. For others of us, it's going to be an interesting winter where it is kind of our last season to get ready for what is going to happen in 2024. And this is a good season for you to circle the wagons and build your community, and also focus on who is in your circle and who can you reach out to. And I really, really want to implore you, reach out to somebody. And if you don't have anybody in your circle, reach out to us over at Redacted. Instagram's a good way to do it. But we'll see if we're going to start building. I'm not saying we're going to. We should start building chapters. Or we should start integrating some way of building, of helping people connect across the country. Because if nothing else, like we're not at 10,000 people yet, so we're still really small. But if nothing else, it's a way for us to build. It's not chapters in some official sense, but it is a chapters in the way of like, this is how we connect with one another. This is how we do that. And if you find yourself in that position, reach out where you're at, who you know, or not who you know, but reach out with where you're at. Please don't dox yourself. And we're going to start finding ways to plug people together. How we do vetting is individual communities are going to have to vet themselves, but we're going to help with resources for how to do that. Maybe it's just resources or encouragement or advice, and so you can reach out that way. But we're getting ready for 2024. It's going to be an interesting year. I think gun culture is going to see a surge of new money. I wouldn't be surprised if the brace ruling starts to go away, because it's going to struggle under legal. It's going to fall apart under legal issues. It's going to fall apart under legal issues, not alone, but it's also going to struggle under cultural issues, because it's just so absurd. What the brace ruling did, and what the pistol brace confirmed to the American person, is that this idea of a short-barreled rifle is completely arbitrary. It has no value in our community. It has no value in this world. So I think it's a better way to look at it from a strategic point of view. The purpose of the brace ruling was to bankrupt gun culture. The purpose of the movements and activities that are being made in this world are that the White House the current Biden presidency's goal is not to essentially ban guns, but to bankrupt us by bankrupting companies. It's the easiest way to do it is to cut off our resources, and the way that we do that is they do that is through brace rulings at the ATF, knowing that businesses who have the desire to be upstanding and rightly functioning businesses will follow the law, even if it's an illegal one, or follow the advice of the dictation of the ATF, because it's literally their families that are on the line. And so it's going to have a trickle down effect where the average employee is going to make less, the company is going to have less opportunity, people are going to find no resources. And this is the way that the Biden administration has very overtly stated that it's what it's going to do. It wants to make you broke so that you cannot oppose his rule. And that's an unfortunate way of thinking about it, but that's exactly the world that we live in. It's what economic warfare looks like. And if you're going to engage in economic warfare, you better not be weak about it. So the brace ruling and the pistol brace showed the world and showed America, especially especially our political elite, something that they probably knew but don't like, is that the idea of a short-barreled rifle is an arbitrary and capricious concept. It needs to be overturned immediately. But we won't, but we won't get too political on this Thanksgiving stream. We have things to be thankful for. Which is actually I'm actually going to jump out of character, not jump out of character. I'm going to make that very clear. I'm thankful that in our lifetime, we could very, very likely see an overturning of elements of the NFA and the Gun Control Act. By the time, like if the gun community continues to pursue growth in cultural expansion, we very likely could see maybe not in our generation, but maybe our children will get to grow up in a tree whose shade we planted in our time. And that is that maybe our children will get to grow up in a world where you can buy a suppressor over the counter and you don't have to fill out some stupid 2-year process to get a short-barreled rifle. And the way that we've done that from a legal standpoint is the brace ruling has the pistol brace has really done it from a technological standpoint. It's proven that this distinction that the ATF has made is pointless. It's proven from a legal standpoint that it has no value. It's also proven from a community and violence level that a short-barreled rifle is not a dangerous weapon in the sense of it's not a criminally used weapon. I think what you have is you have a political class that's very, very afraid that that the people who are underneath it are going to find out that they are the ones robbing them of their position. I think they're afraid of the rabble, is what it is. I think our political elites are afraid of the fact that the people in this world do not view them as necessary components of our future. In fact, the average citizen is becoming educated both in the morality and philosophy of violence, but also in the physical capabilities and skill sets. And they're realizing that guy over there, their neighbor who's got a sign in his yard saying we should ban all guns or whatever, is actually his enemy, and that the individual is learning ways to maneuver around that and position it so that that worldview is the anathema. I personally think that the idea of gun control is indistinguishable from something like slavery. It's an abhorrent practice that views other people as something to be dictated to on that level. And I think it's the same motive of the slave driver that drives the gun control activist community. And it's just that they want the money and the power and the fame and the fake virtue, and they want they want something for free. They want virtue for free, and virtue takes work. And that's something that you learn, whether it's in jiu-jitsu or whether it's on competition fields or whether it's in this environment. And so something that I'm thankful for is that is becoming very obvious to the world. Now, quite a bit is time since I've asked this, so if you've got something that you're thankful for, go ahead and leave it in the chat, and I'll either shout it out or keep it to myself, depending on the content. But we're going to wrap this one up because we've been live for just shy of an hour. And what we're doing here at Redacted is capable because of you. And we have people joining at the last minute. But if you're looking for a great videographer, there's this guy who goes on Instagram by Owls Are Better. He does a good job. I'm thankful for his encouragement. Your project is on the way, buddy. I haven't forgotten about you. It's just holiday shipping takes time. So, in conclusion, kind of wrapping all this up together, we've talked about a number of things. Second Thessalonians talks about what it's going to look like at the end times, and that's going to be that mankind will try to establish itself as God. We're seeing that happen in our day and age. We kill millions of children for our own convenience. We believe that we have authority over basic biology. We have written the idea that government is God into our institutions, and so that if you do not worship the state, you'll be punished. Therefore, the idea of the institution of diversity, equity, and inclusion has placed a no shit religious inquisition inside of your businesses, because if you have a DEI officer, you have an informant who's willing to destroy your life for the sake of some religious orthodoxy in your organization. If you are a DEI officer, I suggest that you find Jesus and quit that inhumane position. But then So this is what we live in this world, and we may live in a time that looks like it's the end time, but what we are witnessing is an echo in reverse. The noise hasn't happened yet. You hear there's a book, Left of Bang. Left is the timeline, so this is all going to look messy because of how things are recorded. But military uses time in measurements of left and right. Right is early, left is later. So left of bang after. I'm sorry, it's the other way around. Right, we push it right. That means we're pushing it back, as in it's going to go away in time. Left, if you move it left, left of bang, before bang. Um, we are existing in a time left of left of before the bang. We're hearing echoes of it through time, and those echoes are the collapses of empires, the fall of Rome, the collapse of the West, and these things. And what the rotting body of America can be to you is it can be just a source of infinite depression, and you can drink that away, and I don't suggest it. But what it also can be is a recognition that you are now on the frontier. If you want to, if we look at the nobility of the frontiersmen, you have to recognize that risks are at play. If you live in a world that has no risk, you will die. It will drive you mad. So find risk and engage in it with a meaningful level. And the death of Minneapolis is a perfect example of this in our day and age. The death of Minneapolis is an echo. The suicide of Minneapolis is an echo of things to come. People will abdicate themselves to evil, open wickedness in their streets, watching society decay and destroy as people put on open demon worshiping and demon summoning experiences for children, mind you, at their popular art centers or whatever you want to call them, while the community suffers under its own licentiousness and destruction, and it will literally commit itself to suicide before it changes its ways. And Minneapolis is a city that uses that as an example. And for us as individuals, we can be tempted with the idea of deliberate failure. Deliberate failure being I hold something in reserve, some sort of self-destructive or soothing activity, and so I allow myself to fail so that I can use that alcohol to soothe my pain. And what I'm doing is I'll set myself up for failure so that the failure is guaranteed. Therefore, by having a guaranteed failure, I'll have a guaranteed circumstance by which to engage in the soothing activity. This is where that masturbation happens. And so the warning is don't be tempted by those things. Instead, prepare for the future. Do what is right, seek which is good, build a community, focus around your area. And if you don't have anybody, reach out and we'll talk to you about it. So when you know how to get a hold of us, you can get a hold of us on Instagram at Redacted LLC. Share this, if you share a page with people, we are so close to 10,000 people. It's kind of ridiculous. We've been growing consistently over time. Right now, every weekend, we're going to put out a short on Instagram called The Workshop or The Workbench, which is a small piece that a small bit of advice or small piece of tinkering that we've seen happen that makes equipment better. And so that's kind of where we're at. Little ways to tweak and adjust your gear. It's a little bit more of a gear one. I've got to listen to this podcast from the beginning. This is actually a very long form stream for the sake of having a stream. I don't do this very often where I sit in my robe, but I think it's going to continue to be a Thanksgiving tradition. So thank you very much for your time, I guess. So in conclusion, and this is not meant to be a replacement of the podcast, but this is something where I get to express things that I'm thankful for. One of the things that I'm thankful for this year, which has become immensely intimate to me, is that for one time in my life, I was able to see kind of God crashed in through my window. And that's not the way of saying it. But I get to be thankful for witnessing people become Christians, knowing that in my time where my faith has been tested, I am here. But I've seen some people that I know, I've seen from my little ivory tower in gun culture, I've witnessed the community coming alive to Christ and God working in this world. And just, it's easy to feel alone. And then watching that happen in somebody you care about is just encouraging. It's just encouraging. Oh, yeah, it's just encouraging to see it happen because you realize that it's kind of like I use this example earlier on in the live stream, but it's like watching Lord of the Rings for the first time. You never get to do it twice. I mean, of course, amnesia or jokes aside, but then seeing somebody else have that, it's like, wow, that's good. It's good to see the grace of the Lord pull people out of their misery and lift them up. And so for that, I'm thankful for this year. I'm also thankful that the Lord has sustained us through all the challenges that we've had to face. It's been a hard year financially, and we've been able to make it each step of the way. That's been good. I'm very thankful for that. The Lord has actually provided ultimately always in our time of need. And it's just amazing. Like, even when I think things are not going well and they look like we're on our ropes and our last straw, I cannot say, like, there's a part of me that wants to doubt it and say, well, you just haven't seen hardship enough. But there's a recognition that in obedience, that is true. The Lord has provided for us in all our hardships and all of our challenges. Another thing I'm thankful for, and then we're just going to wrap this up, is I'm thankful that I get to live in this time where I think I said it earlier, but I'm thankful that I get to live in this time where I'm not tempted by easy materialism. We don't live in that age anymore. We don't live in the boomer wealth period where money, it didn't grow on trees, but it was so easily accessible. So that's what it is. This is the 2023 gratitude stream. I'm thankful that that I'm alive at this time with people who I can look up to, and we can engage in the world that we live in. I'm thankful that the Lord provides for his people. I'm thankful that I'm not alone. I'm thankful for our home. And it's gratitude that is the antidote to depression in this case. So we are going to close out. I'm thankful that I got to witness some things and that I'm not completely lost. And so I think we're going to close out. We're going to close this stream with something to be grateful for, and that is this culture has carried on for a long time. We will endure, and we will endure, and we will carry on. So one of the virtues that so very rarely gets recognized is perseverance. And there's this verse in Romans is suffering produces perseverance, and perseverance hope. I think that's what it is. I'll just open it up. It's Book of Romans. I oftentimes remember it, but of course I'm on camera, so I'm going to forget it now. It should be Romans here. There it is. Romans 5:3. Not only so, but we also glory in our suffering, because we know that suffering produces perseverance. Verse 4. Perseverance, character, and character, hope. And hope does not put us to shame, because God's love has been poured out into our hearts through the Holy Spirit who has been given to us. So that's it. That's how we're closing out this Thanksgiving. So if it's Black Friday and you're going to go have a good time, we are selling our surprise friend teleportation hoods. They are exactly what you think they are, and they're made to order out of a special velour fabric, which is kind of like a velvet, but it's got some stretch to it. It is intended to be not necessarily a gag gift, but it's exactly what you think it is. And the nice thing, it's reusable, but it's one of those things where it's fun. So if you want to if you're going to support us, you can head over to redactedllc.com. That's going to be where we've got like all of our Cabin in the Woods stuff is on pretty aggressive discount right now. But that's where you can find that stuff. We're throwing gummy bears in. They are legal. They're not edibles into our packages, and we will talk to you guys soon. So thanks much, Luke. Thanks for the encouragement. Caleb, thank you very much. We're going to talk to you guys all. I'm assuming this is Rich Scroll at Cirilo. But there's many of you who've been following us for this time, and we thank you for your time. So we'll talk to you guys soon. We'll see you later. And don't forget to go forth and conquer.